You'll figure it out later. You have to be comfortable with this idea that you know you're going to do a thing and you're going to work really hard at it.
Yeah.
And you don't really have all the details worked out, but that's okay.
One of the best lessons I've learned in my career is to not worry too much about what it's like at the top of the mountain. The most important thing is to decide that you're going to make it there and to take that first step on the journey. And sometimes that first step means building a demo before you even have any customers.
One company I wanted to talk about is Captivate IQ. They did YC in winter 18, and they built software that helps sales team figure out the compensation. So if you have lots and lots of salespeople, it turns out it's quite a complex math that goes beyond my Excel skills to figure that out. And they had built some demo software. One of the founders built a demo, but they had no customers and really nothing else.
Totally. And that's how every company starts, right? And every founder looks at Airbnb and just imagines Airbnb in the early days must have been something special. And actually, they kind of all look the same.
And then they convinced us that there are only two major players in the space in the US. And they're both big and they're both pretty bad.
Wow.
So they convinced us that like, if we just become better than these two players, we can win the space.
Yeah, I think that's another mistake founders make, where they sort of say there's no competition. It's it's like blue ocean or whatever. And the reality is that's an indication no one wants the thing. Whereas if you've got these huge incumbents that making tons and tons of money and haven't innovated in decades, actually that's perfect.
Yes.
Because it's like a demonstration that people actually pay for this software.
Yeah, and this is one of those companies where everything they kind of said at the interview turned out to be true.
Wow. And so the normal state of a company when it applies to YC, I mean, I think back to my application. I was working with two friends in a bedroom in London. We cobbled together this janky prototype. Like, we bullied some friends into using it. We had no revenue. In fact, we were losing money on every single transaction. And that's pretty normal, right? Even earlier, I think YC's today is going back to sort of the origins of YC, of funding people earlier and earlier. So a lot of people I interviewed this batch, and I'm sure it's the same with you, haven't even quit their jobs yet. And they've got an idea, and perhaps that idea is something they'd worked on in their previous job, a tool they'd built or a problem they'd identified. And they've recruited a couple of co-founders to come along to the interview. But really, there's not much there yet. You're really looking more at the quality of the founder than the progress of the business.
That's a big point for all startups. Don't be afraid to pivot. Many of the most successful companies initially pitched ideas during their interview that didn't work out. That isn't necessarily a sign of failure. What's most important is that you have the drive to keep trying until you do finally land on the right idea. So, what type of people have the perseverance to keep grinding until they've made something people want? Next up, Diana and Michael will talk about one common trait of the best early stage founders.
To be best in the world. There's this aspect of the best people at the top of their careers. They're actually very not well-rounded. They're very quirky people.
Yes.
For good reason.
Yes.
And that's what makes them outlier. Like, by definition, if you're average, then it's like, okay, you're not going to build a great company.
No.
Because building a successful large company, by definition, you're going to be out of multiple standard deviations out of the norm.
Yes.
You have to go all in.
And I think that a lot of young people have it's never been communicated to them that the strategy that got them to this school, that got them the meta job, that got them the Ivy League degree, is not going to be the strategy that actually gets them to be successful as a startup founder. And I'd argue not all careers are this way. I'm sure there are other careers where that kind of hedging strategy is still a great strategy. But in our game, so few people win. Like, the problem is, like, so few people turn any amount of their like paper stock value into real cash, that like you have to be lucky and really good.
Some of this may seem like it's outside of your control, but that's not necessarily the case. You can create your own luck by staying determined and shutting out all other distractions in your life. As you'll hear from Harj and Pete, you just have to keep at it.
Here's like another interesting case is Amplitude, which is now like a public company offering an analytics product. Yes. And we interviewed the founders, Spencer and Curtis, in 2011 now, so it's been kind of like a while. And they applied to YC with this idea that was a mobile app on your Android phone that was voice to text. So basically the idea was, hey, if I want to text while I'm driving, I'll talk into the phone and it will like send my texts for me. And we didn't think the idea had any legs at the time, because we were like, well, like Google's just going to do this. They're really good at this. And like we had Paul Buchheit, the founder of Gmail, early Google employee, in the interview, just like hammering on Spencer, saying like, Google is so great at this. Like there's no, like, how are you guys going to win? And Spencer was just so intense in like his comebacks and just like determined to like work on this idea that we were like, we don't agree with like this idea, but this is the kind of like intense person you want. Like they're almost irrationally intense in how attached they are to the thing that they're working on.